Well, hello, visitors to and denizens of the YouTubeverse. I'm John, your social hermit in the woods, and in this video, I'm going to show how I make ground meat jerky. Making jerky is simple and fun, but you want to do it safely, which means keeping everything very clean. You're going to see that I'll be using gloves on my hands when I'm handling the meat, and going to be using a proper curing salt. Now, normally I might do this with my own homemade spicings, and that's nice because you can make exactly the flavors you want. I'm always very careful when I do this, and I recommend you do the same. Get proper curing salt, nitrate salt, and use the correct amount of that in there. That's a very important food safety measure for this kind of product. But several months ago, I was in an outdoor store on one of my trips to town, and I happened to see a commercial seasoning kit in a Mandarin teriyaki flavor. As always, when there's something commercial I'm showing here, this is just something I bought and was interested in and thought I wanted to share. I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not paid by anybody. Nobody's bribing me to talk about this. So this is the High Mountain Seasonings jerky cure and seasoning, and like I say, in a Mandarin teriyaki flavor. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Why don't I give it a try? So, okay. So first off, what's in the box here? Well, you get a set of instructions which are well written. I've looked over them. They're good. They contain instructions both for ground meat jerky and for jerky made with strips. I normally would use flank steak if I were going to do it, of plain meat, or if you want to make like pepperoni type sticks as well. So it contains your instructions. It contains a packet of your cure material, which is, this has got the nitrate salts in it. And then their seasonings, which is their Mandarin teriyaki bit. And then it comes with a like a spice mixing bottle. Oddly enough, there's no cap for the bottle, which is a bit of a nuisance. And I think the idea of the bottle is when you mix these two together um, prior to adding them to the meat, you can put them in here. I would put a lid on it, and then you can shake it really well and get a nice uniform mixture of this. So I'm going to solve this by going into my collection of empty spice bottles that I always save for various projects and matching a lid. There we go, one matching lid. Okay, you might be wondering why is it that there are two packets here and why don't they pre-mix them? The curing salts will degrade and go off on contact with certain other kinds of compounds, including moisture and some other things. If you mix the two of these together, the shelf life of the cure will be much, much shorter than keeping them separate. So that's why the two are kept separate. One other thing I'll note here is the cure packet, conveniently, is done, it's a resealable packet, so you can open it up, you can use some, and you can reseal this. You want to try to keep that dry, away from moisture. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they cheap out and don't do that with the seasoning. Now, the seasonings are not going to go off as quickly with air exposure, but this means that since I'm only going to use a portion of this today, I'll want to be getting like a Ziploc bag and closing this up and sealing it back inside there until the next time I do something. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and see what do we do here. So I'm going to make a small batch today, basically 1 pound of ground meat. You want the leanest meat you can get, and really this is going to be beef usually. If you get something like bison, you can do that, or elk. Don't do pork or bear is my suggestion. I have ground bear meat in the fridge. Both of those have risk of trichinosis. The temperatures you're getting to here are not high enough to protect you from that. You do not want trichinosis, so stick to beef, bison, venison, elk, something like that. And for most of us, it's going to be ground beef. And you want to get it as lean as possible. They didn't have any extra lean when I did my monthly trip to the grocery store. So I've just gotten lean here, and we'll do that. Okay, and all the equipment I'm going to show in the rest of this video, the jerky gun will work on 1 pound at a time. This is a good project to do in the wintertime because your dehydrator is going to make a fair bit of heat and you're going to run it quite a while. So on a hot summer day, this is not ideal, but it's a great thing to do in winter. And then I'm going to show you how we can vacuum seal this and then freeze that into little pouches, and they're good whenever you want them over the next couple of years. So let's get started. Get your meat out of the pack and break it up and into some sort of mixing bowl. Now we're going to set the meat aside for a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and for this kit, they tell us for 1 pound of ground meat, which what we have there, we want 2.5 teaspoons of the seasoning, and 2 teaspoons of the cure. Unlike much of my other cooking, with something like this, and in particular when you're dealing with your nitrate curing materials, you don't want to do this by eye. You really do want to measure pretty accurately. If your meat isn't exactly a pound or very, very close, do get a scale, do measure it, find out what it is. 2 teaspoons. Okay. I can see there's a couple of big chunks in there. I'm going to get a small spoon and go in there and just crush those. You want to get this as even and uniform as possible. Okay, that's all nicely mixed. And now all we're going to do is we're going to take our flavorings and our cure, and they suggest in the instructions here that you can use a little bit of water as well. They say up to 1/4 cup of ice water per pound of meat, and I think the idea there is that water helps dissolve the curing components and move stuff around. So we'll probably do that here as well. Let's get a little bit of cold water. Now I'm not going to use ice water because we're going to let this sit for quite a while. Okay, I'm not going to use a full 1/4 cup here. I'm going to use more like about 1/8 of a cup just to make my life easy, so it's not too runny. I'm going to add that in. There's my seasonings and cure. Now you want to go back to having your gloves, and all you're going to do is mix this. Easiest done by hand. That little bit of water helps dissolve the spices and get everything mixed in. And you want to get it very uniformly mixed up. This only takes a couple of minutes. Okay, once it's all mixed together really well, we're going to want to put this in the fridge and let it cure. And in fact, I'm going to let this go overnight. They say you can go as little as 4 hours, but I'm not in a rush. Overnight will be even better. That will give time for the curing compound to fully diffuse through everything and start doing its job, and for the flavors to mature. So I'm going to roll it up like that, and then we're going to get a smaller container. I'm going to put that in there. Now we're going to cover this with saran wrap, and we're going to put it in the fridge overnight and carry on with the rest of the process tomorrow. So now we're on to the next stage, which is the extrusion and forming of the seasoned cured meat. It's cured overnight with the seasonings. It's got a nice uniform brown color to it. Looks good. And what we're going to do is we're going to spread that out into thin little strips to put on the dehydrator. Now, I'm going to do that using a jerky gun. And a jerky gun is really basically just the same concept as a grease gun with a food-safe construction. It has a cylinder. This is a 1 pound cylinder. It's kind of a smallish jerky gun, but it's good enough for my uses, and even if you're doing a couple of pounds. So how this works is you have different nozzles that will go on here. This would be a sausage stuffing type nozzle for making pepperoni, which I've tried with mixed success. And you can do wide strips of jerky, or you can do narrow strips of jerky. And I'm going to opt for doing the narrow strips. What if you didn't have a jerky gun? Can you still do this? Absolutely. There's 2 things you can do, at least. The first is you can manually take your cured meat and then separate it into, like, meatballs so big, and then hand form those into little patties of around, sort of 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters thick kind of thing, and put those around. That works just fine. Or if you look in the instructions that came with this particular seasoning mix that I'm trying here, they suggest putting this between 2 sheets of wax paper and using a rolling pin to roll it out as a kind of a uniform sheet, and then taking a knife and cutting strips. All of those work fine. But I have a jerky gun. I'm going to use it. They're not expensive. So all we're going to do is, I'm going to go with the 2 narrow strips layout. You lock on your extrusion barrel there. And wearing gloves, you'll note. Get my jerky, my meat here. Form it into kind of a tube and down into the jerky gun. Okay, there we go. Screw this on. And as you can see, it's like I said, it's like a grease gun. There's a ratcheting system in here. Okay, bring that down to where we're ready to start applying pressure. We'll get the rest of this stuff set outside and away, and then we'll go with the extrusion. Okay, so that's screwed on, that's screwed on. We got our nozzles there. Put this here, and then here's all you do. As you work the jerky gun, draw it backwards so that you lay out 2 nice, even strips. When you get to the end of the run, I like to take a butter knife and break the 2 strips off. Okay. Now, if you want to, you can gently separate stuff a little bit here, and then start another row. And I have plenty of drying rack space, so I'm not going to crowd things. Probably only going to need 1 more rack, so just going to do that. Now you'll get down to a point at the end where the plunger on the jerky gun won't go any further. There's still actually a fair bit of ground meat left in there. So what you're going to do at this point is back up the plunger, unscrew everything. There, see, we've got that a little bit of meat there we'll recover, and we have this chunk right here which hasn't made it through the former. Okay, and remember I said you didn't need a jerky gun to do this. You could do it other ways. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do with this. I'm just going to mash that out. Try to get it about the same thickness as the strip so that it'll dry at the same rate. We'll set that down there. And I'm going to use my butter knife here to get out the rest of this excess. Like I did on the last tray, I'm going to separate these out slightly so they don't stick together. Okay, so that was 1 pound. I used 2 trays. This is a 5-tray dehydrator. So as I said, 2, you could maybe do almost 3 pounds if you really packed stuff tightly in one run. That gives you an idea. Okay, now we're going to program this. Turn it on. I'm going to set the time. I'm going to go with 7 hours. It might need a little more than that, but we'll check it at 7 hours. And I'm going to set it at the maximum for this dehydrator, which is 160 Fahrenheit, and I actually wish it went a little higher than that. And when I take it out of set mode, it'll switch itself on, go through the actual temperature, 66, time remaining, 7 hours. Well, it's had its time to dehydrate, so let's open it up and take a look, see what it looks like. That actually looks really good. You're going to have personal preferences into how dry. You don't want it to get completely crumbly, but you don't want it with too much moisture in it. What you might notice though is that there are little glistening flecks of oil on top of some of this. This was not extra lean ground beef. It was only lean. So oil on the bottom side will have dripped through, but oil on the top side will be sitting there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these and we're going to lay them out on a piece of paper towel to soak some of that off and finish cooling down. Okay, so we're going to take these, peel them off, flip them upside down, and onto the paper towel. There we go. Beautiful. That is just about perfect. Smells really good too. Something to mention at this point is you noticed my dehydrator went to 160 Fahrenheit. Um, Now I'm okay with that, but ideally you might want it to go a little bit higher. If I wanted to make sure that these had gotten to an internal temperature of, let's say, 175, I could still do that. What I would do is I would let them get to this stage, dry them off like I'm doing here, and then I would put them on a cookie sheet and put them in the oven at 175, whatever my desired temperature was. And they don't need very long. These are not very thick. Moisture's all gone. They'll come up to temperature in 2 or 3 minutes. So you can put them in there for 5 minutes at your desired minimum temperature, and they've had that treatment. So, but I'm okay with this from experience. I'm okay with the 160 I get here, given that it's long enough and I'm using appropriate amounts of curing compounds. Let's take a little tiny piece and try it out. It smells really good. It is good. The orange flavor is kind of subtle. I think unless you knew that you were looking for orange, you wouldn't quite put your finger on it. But the mixture is quite nice. Not enough to convince me to not normally stick to doing my own seasoning here, but this is a nice variety. Glad I tried it. I'd give it an A. Once the oil is cleared off of these and they've cooled down a bit, we'll do the final stage, which is packaging these for long-term storage. Prior to packaging these up, I'm going to try to divide it into probably 4 more or less equal portions by mass. So that's obviously a fairly big chunk right there. And if you think about it, each one of those portions would then be equivalent to a 1/4 pound of uncooked beef. So that is probably 1 portion there. And I'm going to break these down into slightly shorter pieces. Notice the way they break. They don't snap. They're not brittle, but they don't drag apart. And that's sort of how you tell that the amount of dryness is correct. There we go. Roughly 4 more or less, I think, even-sized portions of it. And now we're going to go ahead and vacuum seal this. For individual portions like this that I'm going to take hiking or hunting or out on the boat, and we're going to want to maybe eat a little bit of it and then reseal it and put it back in my pocket, I like to use these pre-made zippered vacuum bags. So you'll see how that works. The Ziploc is already sealed at one end and the other end is open. We're going to load stuff in, seal the bottom end, and then they'll be ready for storage. That's what one of the bags looks like. You open it up. Slide your stuff in, and you want to leave a reasonable gap up there for doing your vacuum seal. So now you can see why I was breaking those down to shorter lengths. And now we're just going to let the vacuum sealer do its magic, which is easy because these are dry. Close the front, seal that down. All good there. Now just label these with date and flavor so you can tell which one is which. So orange teriyaki. For long-term storage, I'll now put these in the freezer. My experience is that up to 2 years from now, I'll still be able to pull one of these out, throw it in my camping gear or whatever, And it's good without refrigeration at that point, at least for up to about a week or so. The nitrates again and the dehydration are what help with that. And the fact it was sealed while it was still hot and didn't have time to really get too exposed to everything. So there you go. Simple, easy to make ground meat jerky. I hope this gave you some ideas. It gets a lot more fun if you start trying to make your own spices in there. But do remember, use a nitrate and use the right amount for safety. Until next time, this is John, your social hermit in the woods, saying goodbye.